You talking about international education. More specifically, today we are talking about how to waive the English requirement. This is actually a very, very common question that we get in higher education as a recruiter, as an executive over enrollments. We get this question a lot because English tests can be daunting. They can be challenging for some students. And so a lot of students ask, how can they waive these requirements? So today we're going to go over this. Actually, it's kind of funny when coming up with the name this um, of this chat, we actually decided how to waive the English requirement, even though technically that is not how universities see it. Because the proper way to word it would be how to satisfy the English requirement. Because regardless of someone's level of English proficiency, that requirement is still there. It can never be waived. It's always there. And so the question is not how to get away with it because it's always there, but how to satisfy or how to meet that requirement. And so there are ways to satisfy that requirement besides a test. And so we're going to be going over a lot of things today. So the main things that we're going to be talking about today: why is an English score needed? Who needs an English test score? Because honestly, not every international student needs an English score. Common English exams. Then what to do if your English is not that good. So if your English is not highly proficient, what can you do? So that's what we're going to be covering today. So let's dive right into it. So the first thing, why is an English score needed? And so honestly, this is a common question that we get because, again, the English exams can be challenging. They can be daunting. And so there's a lot of students that are thinking, I feel like my English is already good enough. I should be able to go study in the United States and just understand the English. So think of it like this. What if someone does think that their English is good? They come to the United States or the UK, Canada, Australia, wherever. They go and they try to study, but their English is just not good. Then what's the situation there? What predicament does that put them in? What does that help them understand in the classroom? Honestly, it makes it so that they don't fully understand what is being taught. And if they don't understand what's being taught, then they're not going to understand and become an expert in that topic. They're not going to pass their classes. They're not going to get jobs, and they're just going to fail the classes. So unfortunately, there are people who think that, I can get away with this. I might be able to get in by either cheating or, convincing someone that I understand it just fine. Yeah, that's not always going to work in your favor, or in their favor, not you, because you're good, but in their favor. And so we have seen people unfortunately make it to the United States and study, and their English honestly was just not that good. And so universities have standards. All colleges have standards. They actually have standards that their students need to meet. So students need an English score so that they can pass the classes and do well in class. I once had a classmate who was an international student, great guy, golden heart, really strong on everything but English. When it came to math, the guy was awesome. When it came to creative campaigns, the guy was awesome. Everything but English. And so the guy struggled in class, even though he was really, really smart otherwise. And so it made it so that the classes that we were in together, you could tell the guy was struggling. He was just not understanding anything. And he sat with some people from his home country. And then that way they could interpret for him when needed, because a lot of times things just simply went over his head. And so English is needed. And so I don't know if you notice how I talk when it comes to words I choose, my vocabulary, but I spend a lot of time with international students, so I try to speak using simple words, simple sentences, but sometimes I'll use what could be viewed as like harder words. Um, and so if you're understanding what I'm saying, great, you could probably do okay at university or college. But if you're struggling with what I'm saying, you might want to start earlier with like an ESL program, a bridge, a pathway program. We'll go over what those are here in a little bit. But English is needed to pass classes, plain and simple. Because so I studied, well, I know Korean, but let's go back to why is English important. So I know Korean, and so I spent 2 years in Korea as a Christian missionary, talking with people about church. And so I was like, okay, good. I'm good at Korean. But then the first time I went to Korea for business, all of a sudden I realized my vocabulary in business was just not there, and I had to study again. And so, yes, I knew Korean, but I didn't know business Korean. And I would imagine if I sat in a Korean classroom, my academic Korean would not be there as well. And so if someone knows casual English, that's fine, but they might not understand academic English. So how to write a research paper, how to write convincing paragraphs, or how to give a presentation in English. And so that's why it's really good to take a real evaluation of your English abilities. Okay, so who needs an English score? It's almost all international students. And so a university, a college, a high school, they'll require a document by the US, well, the State Department, called I-17. On that I-17, they will list out what their requirements are for migration. So in order for a student to come study with them. So it talks about the grades and it talks about the English. So for English, a lot of schools will actually list out what is required, and they may list out countries where all of a sudden the English is not required. And so for the most part, all international students are required to take English, or are required to have an English score. The exception is usually the UK, well, students from the UK, students from Australia, from Canada, from New Zealand. And there are a couple other countries that could satisfy that requirement, even though English is very, very heavy in that country. The main country that most Americans think of when they think of countries that may or may not fall in that, honestly, are countries like India or countries in Africa, so like Kenya, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, because in these countries, people do speak English. Like there are a lot of people that speak English, and their English usually is pretty dang good. But also in that same country, there are people who honestly do not understand English. So there's a spectrum of people who fully understand English, who are fluent at it, and people who don't understand English. So what this opens is a big gray space, as we would call it in English. So there's a big gray space, like, okay, are they fluent in English or do they not know English? And what this means is when someone applies for admissions, we honestly don't know where they are. They could be here, they could be here. We honestly don't know. And so that is the reason why at least a test is required or asked of for those students. So, so students from countries that are not the ones I just listed, most universities will require an English exam. There are different ways to satisfy the English requirement if you're not from those countries. So for example, one of those ways to satisfy the English requirement and waive the English requirement, if you will, is if you've studied in English for the past 3 or 4 years. So I've seen some schools where their English requirement is they need an IELTS, TOEFL, Duolingo, or a test they need the SAT, ACT, GMAT, GRE, so a test score, or they need to prove that they have been studying in English for the past 3 or 4 years. So they need to be taking classes and passing those classes for 3 to 4 years. So that is one way, another way to waive the English requirement. Another way, as I just mentioned, is if someone takes a test. So if someone takes like the SAT or the ACT, the GMAT or the GRE, a lot of those tests, well, all those tests, there's an English portion, like a vocabulary section, and a math section. And so the math section, yeah, we all speak math, if you will. We can all understand math. It's a universal language. Great. But the English, there are schools that say, okay, if you get a certain score on the English part of that test, that could satisfy the English requirement. So if you take the GMAT, GRE, SAT, or ACT and do well on the English side, that could satisfy the English requirement. So those are some of the ways to satisfy the English requirement or waive the English requirement. One other way, it's not too common, but requesting an interview. There are some schools that will be able to do that to satisfy the English requirement. So what they'll ask is they'll ask for you to write an essay and then prove that, yes, you are good at writing and prove that you're good at reading. So reading and writing, but then for listening and speaking, they'll set up an interview and they'll interview you to make sure that, yes, you do indeed understand, you can speak and listen and communicate in English. So that's what they're looking for. So there are some universities or colleges that could use that as a way to satisfy the English requirement as well, is an essay and an interview. So those are the common ways to satisfy the English requirement or waive the English requirement without an actual test. Either be from a country, do an interview, prove that you did indeed study in English for 3 to 4 years, or take a major test like the SAT, ACT, GMAT, GRE, and do well on the English portion. So those are the ways to satisfy the English requirement. Well, I guess there actually is one more way. Actually, I do have it in my talking notes as well. So there are local tests. So for example, in Germany, they got the DAAD. In China, they got Huikao, Gaokao. So these national exams. In Africa, there's the WEAC. If someone does well on the English portion of those exams, then that could satisfy the English requirement. So if you do have a national exam in your country and there's an English portion of it, do well on that portion. Because that is another way to satisfy the English requirement. Not a lot of schools will use that because, and this is honestly speaking here, is because a lot of the schools don't understand that, oh, yeah, that is a way to prove that English is good. So that's another complication when it comes to studying abroad. But yes, if your national exam does have an English requirement, make sure you do well on it. Okay. So common English exams. So these are IELTS, TOEFL, Duolingo. There's another one lesser known called E3PT. Good people, good people. So a lot of people are familiar with TOEFL, IELTS. Those are the two big ones. Duolingo is new-ish to the industry, so is E3PT. So IELTS, mostly everyone's familiar with IELTS. It's a British system, or it's designed from the UK. It's fully trusted. It's deployed or used everywhere. On an IELTS score, what you'll want is about a 6.5. A 6.5 will get you into almost any university around the world. So 6.5 is really good. 6 will get you into some schools. 5.5 IELTS will get you into community college and also pathway programs, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So 5.5 is what's needed. The absolute lowest I've ever seen a school accept for the IELTS is a 4.5. Yeah, there's a couple schools that I know of that can accept a 4.5 IELTS. That is a low score, but and if you come in with a 4.5, be prepared to study hard because it's gonna be challenging with a 4.5 to understand everything that's taught in a normal classroom. So you're gonna need to get a tutor, you're gonna need extra support. You're really going to need the assistance to make sure that yes, you indeed pass your classes. So 4.5 is the absolute lowest you could have in IELTS, and find a school. Now, as far as like the bands, so you got IELTS or any test, and usually they have what they call bands. And so that's reading, writing, listening, speaking, and you have a subscore. And so, okay, what is your subscore or your band? And so if a school has a 4.5, they may say, okay, no score under a 4. Or if it's a 6.5 IELTS, they may say no subscore or band under a 6. So yeah, you do have to take note of that as well. A quick tip, if you are studying for an English school or for an English exam, make sure that you are testing regularly to see how you are across those 4 subscores and do what's needed to strengthen your subscore. So if your weakness is listening, okay, watch a lot of movies, watch TV shows in English. That will help you understand more. So um, there's one show in particular that does help quite a bit. It's the show from the 1990s. It's called Friends. So Friends is a good show to watch if you're trying to understand English. And the reason why it's a good sh- good show to use is because it's 6 people, 6 friends, and they just have normal conversations. And so it's almost as if you're watching friends, like your friends, have conversations. So watch that show if you're trying to get your listening up. If you're trying to get your speaking up, this is actually, in my opinion, the most challenging one because in order to practice speaking, most of the time you need someone listening in English as well. What I recommend for speaking, honestly, read out loud. So read books, but read out loud because that will get your tongue, your mouth used to pronouncing those words. So you could speak out loud. Well, you could read books. You could give your thoughts out loud. And so you could be watching, let's say you're watching the movie, right? You could pause it, then try to explain in English what just happened or what you just saw. So just try talking to yourself. When it comes to reading in English, okay, that's simple. Just read the internet, read social media, forgive Americans with crappy grammar. But read in English, like plain and simple, just read. Um, so then for writing, yeah, just keep a journal. That's what I recommend for writing. Keep a journal, write about your day and what happened in your day. Um, or you can feel free to like write a story, write in social media using English. Just get used to writing. So reading, writing, listening, speaking. So practice, okay? As a tangent, some little bonus, if you will. Going back to the topic at hand. So common English exams, so TOEFL. TOEFL is also very, very common, just like IELTS. TOEFL is awesome. They have multiple TOEFL exams. So there's the IBT, which is the most common, the internet-based TOEFL. on TOEFL, you'll want around 80, 85. Low end, absolute low end of like 60. Like try to be above a 60. And just like with IELTS, TOEFL does have bands, they have subscores, same exact categories. So just make sure that you're good. There are a lot of different types of TOEFLs. So like I said, the paper-based TOEFL, internet-based TOEFL, so the IBT, PBT, those are the two most common, but there's a lot of different types. Duolingo. Duolingo is a newer one, like I said. This one, it's less expensive and it's done on a device. So it could be done on a laptop. So what the people at Duolingo actually do a very, very good job at catching, I hate to say it, but people who cheat, because believe it or not, there are people who cheat on English exams. And so Duolingo E3PT does the same thing. They'll do what they call proctor. So what a proctor means is there's someone online as well watching you to make sure that people aren't cheating. So some of the things that they look for is if you look, let's say right here, I'm looking at my computer screen. If I look over here a lot, they may think, oh, they have notes right there. So they'll look for things like that. They'll look for devices. And so if I'm like this a lot, I may be looking at my phone. And so they look for things like that. They look for, well, they block other things from popping up on your computer screen because they're afraid that you're going to be using another browser to cheat. So they're looking for all these different things to make sure that students are not cheating. And if they do think that you cheated, as a university, we'll see your score, but we'll also see screenshots of when they think you may have cheated. So then as a university, we'll be able to go into the entire video and see those clips of when they think you may have been cheating. So then they'll give their response, like the Duolingo or E3PT will give their response saying, okay, this person clearly cheated. Their test does not work. Or they'll say, hey, university, we have a strong feeling this person may have cheated. We're not 100% positive on it, but we have a strong feeling they did. So it's really up to you. So then as a university, you could look at it and say, okay, yep, we feel that they cheated, so we're not going to accept their score. So those Duolingo and E3PT are available as well. So the pros and cons between the batch, TOEFL and IELTS, the pro is they are accepted everywhere. Like any school, any college, any university, any high school, they will all accept TOEFL or IELTS, like everyone does. Where not everyone has accepted Duolingo or E3PT yet. So the positive is they are widely accepted. The negative is, or what can be viewed as a negative, is you have to do these usually at a testing center. So you have to register at a testing center. So you need to find your local testing center, go down there, interview, well, take the test. Duolingo and E3PT, pros and cons are actually the opposite. The pro is accessibility. You could do these from a laptop in your home if you feel like it, as long as you have a good quiet place and an internet connection. That's what's required. Quiet place and internet connection. So you could use these anywhere. So that's a huge pro. The con is they are not accepted by every college or university. So the number of schools that are accepting those, it is growing, but it's not everyone just yet. And so those are the pros and cons for either one. Okay. Then the last topic for today, what to do if your English score is just not that good, or your English is not that good. And so again, there's certain levels that are required by schools. So let's say it's a 6.0 IELTS, 79 IBT TOEFL, and Duolingo E3PT equivalent. What if you just do not do that great on the score or on the exam? What do you do? So down here you can see it, ESL Bridge Pathway. So ESL stands for English as a Second Language. Some schools also call them ELP, English Language Programs. There's a lot of different names for them, but ESL, ESL, so honestly, go do an ESL program. ESL programs are cool because whether you're coming over here to study so that you can get into a university, or you're coming to study English so that you can do your job better, like, or if you're coming to study English because I don't know, you fell in love with an American and you want to get married. Like there's a lot of different reasons to study English, and ESL they'll let you study English regardless of what your reasoning is. Also with ESL, they could accept you at any level. So if you just know the ABCs, they could get you into an ESL program. All the way to you're at a 6.0 IELTS and you're trying to get to a 7. Yes, they could help you there as well. So ESL programs are fantastic. The pro with ESL, it's focused on English. So you're not taking math, science, anything else. You just focus on your English. What a Bridge program is, Bridge is kind of like an ESL program, but Bridge is designed specifically to get you prepared for college or university studies. So that's what a bridge is. So those are specifically designed for students trying to get into college or university. Now a pathway is slightly different. So I spent about eight years with major pathway providers. I can go into my resume on another video, but long story short, I have a ton of experience with pathways, almost the most in the industry. Pathways are great. What it is, it's where you're studying and you're getting your English prepared to be successful at college or university. And at the same time, you're taking college or university classes as well. So you may be taking things like math or exercise or health or something that's very, very light on English. And while you're studying those, you're also taking English classes that will prepare you for English, well, for university or college studies. So the way that I typically describe a pathway is it's designed for someone whose academics and or English might be slightly lower than what's usually required to get into the university direct. So for example, Oregon State University, they have a pathway program. They're fantastic. I used to be over marketing and recruitment there. Really, really good people there, great university. To get into the university, it's a 6.5 IELTS. So 6.5 IELTS to get into the university. To get into the pathway, 5.5 IELTS. So you can get in with a lower English score, but what will happen is that pathway program, which is usually 1 year, during that 1 year, you'll get English support so that by the end of that year, when you're going into your second year, your English then will be good enough to satisfy the requirements and be at the level where you can be successful at college or university. So if your English is not good, you could do an ESL program, you could do a bridge program, you could do a pathway program. Another option, study at home. Like just take 1 more year, study English, focus on your English, and then get another score. An option that I never recommend is cheat. Like never cheat. Because, well, let's, instead of English, let's take cooking, for example, because I love to cook. Let's say someone's like, oh, I want to be a chef. Great. And they cheat. They cheat out every class, every entrance exam. And all of a sudden they're like level 4 cooking and Gordon Ramsay's their chef or their professor. And they don't know the first thing on how to make eggs. And how do you think they're going to do in that class? They're going to burn their eggs. They're going to burn their toast. Like it's going to be a disaster. They're just going to fail. And it's going to be embarrassing for them. And so that is why I recommend never cheating. Always make sure that you yourself are learning. You're learning English. A couple side notes when it comes to English as well is if your English score, let's say you're applying for a university and let's say your English score is a 5.5, but you write an essay like a letter, like an entrance examination or statement of intent, and the English is perfect, that disconnect, that difference is going to raise a huge red flag. So make sure that all your documents, all your essays, everything in your admissions packet matches your level of English. Because again, if you have a low English score and a perfectly written admission statement, you're going to get denied. You're going to get flagged for cheating, and you're going to get denied. The reason why I bring that up is because of ChatGPT. ChatGPT, it's a tool out there. It's artificial intelligence. People use that. Well, we're starting to see more and more people use that to write essays to try to get into university. And yeah, you'll get denied if you use that. Another process that we see is people having other people write their statement, like their statement of purpose. And so if someone else writes their statement of purpose, yeah, and it doesn't match up to your English ability, you will get denied. And so think of it like this. Let's say me as a student, let's say I'm trying to get into Harvard, and I have someone write me an essay and they write it in Shakespeare for some reason. Yeah, that is going to look weird. It's not going to match my abilities or my preferences, and I will get denied. So make sure that everything in your application matches your level of English. So how to waive the English requirements? Again, the English requirements are, or how to satisfy the English requirements, take a test. Take IELTS, TOEFL, Duolingo, E3PT. Or you could write an essay with an interview. You can prove that you have indeed been studying in English for the last couple of years, like 3 to 4 years. That could satisfy the English requirements. Taking the SAT, ACT, GMAT, GRE, and proving that, yes, you did do well on the English portion of those exams. Or you could take your local standardized test, the DAD, the WAAC, the Gaokao, Huikao, whatever your national exam is, take that and do well on the English side. So those are the ways to satisfy the English requirement. So hopefully this has been helpful. It's been fun on my end. If you have any questions, feel free to email the team at admissions@brightered.com. Actually, let me put that into the ticker here really fast. Okay. Admissions@brightered.com. So email the team there, and we'll be able to take care of you. All right. Well, thanks for joining. This has been fun. So thank you so much. All right. Take care. Bye.